Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. We have an exciting podcast today. We have an author with us, and I am extremely excited to talk about this book because I feel like reading it has taught me so much about my own parenting and what's going on in my house. And the author we have with us today is Margot Machol Bisnow, and she is the author of a book about entrepreneurs, but she spent 20 years in government serving as a former commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission under President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, also as a former chief of staff to President Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors. And her career, her long career surrounded by some of the great business minds. She also authored this book that we're going to talk about today, Raising an Entrepreneur: How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dream. Margot, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted.
Oh my gosh. So I was reading through this. So I will just tell you, I have 4 daughters. So I'm reading through this and I'm like making a mental note of the things that I focus on and the things that they focus on. And maybe in certain cases, I'm focusing on the wrong things because one of the things you said is one of the things that these parents have looked back on and said is, maybe I shouldn't have pushed so hard. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to fix things. And I find myself doing that. So tell us a little bit about how you got this idea and who you sat down and talked to.
So how I got the idea, and by the way, when I had kids, your kids' age, I had no idea what I was doing. So.
Okay, good. That makes me feel better because I'm like, I don't want them to figure that out. You know, as a parent, you ever have that moment where you're like, they can't figure out that I really don't know what I'm doing.
Right. I think none of us know what we're doing. But, and I didn't think about so many of these things in my own family until afterwards, after I'd written the book and I talked to lots of parent groups. And I was like, oh my God, I should have done this. I should have done that. But you don't think about it at the time. So how I ended up doing it is my older son, Elliot, started an organization called Summit Series, which is conferences of young entrepreneurs. And so starting in 2010, I would go to these events and I didn't know a lot of young entrepreneurs. And I was just so curious how they turned out the way they did. And so I went up and I asked them, like, how did you end up like taking on so much risk, working so hard to achieve a dream? And they all told me the same thing. They all said I had someone who believed in me. Usually it was a parent. More usually it was their mom. But it was always someone. I mean, even on occasion, I'd run into someone who didn't really have good parents, but they had a grandma or a stepdad or a next door neighbor. It was always somebody, usually a mom. But
as I was reading through, I noticed obviously that it was a lot of moms and you talked to a lot of the mothers. And as a mom, of course, I was like, oh, cool, this is the mom that has the impact. But I think that is sort of telling because a culture tells us all the time that a strong father in the home it determines the outcome for the child, which I think in many cases, dad was there, but it was really mom who was kind of the focus and the one who was making decisions or cutting off screen time at a certain point and things like that, or allowing it, saying, okay, this is your passion. I'm going to bring in the video games. I'm going to allow you to continue doing this while you have your schoolwork on the side. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's super important for people to have a dad, and my kids have a wonderful dad. And most of the entrepreneurs in this book have wonderful dads, but most of the dads were more kind of traditionally oriented, get good grades, go to a good college. And more of the moms were like, oh, this is what gives you joy. I want to support that. I'm so proud of you for working so hard in the thing that gives you joy. So I think the moms tend to be more emotional.
That makes sense.
And a lot of the people that I interviewed, they're in their mid to late 30s to 40s now. So I think that when, they were growing up 20 years ago. And I think dads today, a lot of them are more kind of attuned
right.
to kind of realizing that not all children are the same.
Yeah. And I think that was what I thought was most fascinating. I mean, everybody's backstory was a little different. You had some folks that had come in and lived as immigrants in this country, very poor upbringing, and to become these wildly successful entrepreneurs. But one of the things that struck me is just that these were parents who obviously had encouraged their kids in everything possible. And they encouraged them to get very good grades. And sometimes that wasn't necessarily, I mean, the story about the crazy
Rich Asians.
Yes, the
John
guy
Chu.
who directed that, who was like, I turned in my papers on video. Instead of doing papers, I did video. I'm like, the amount of coercion that takes, like the guts to go to your teacher and say that, but also as a parent to allow that, because I think we are sometimes caught up in, no, these are the rules, you follow the rules. And I was like, that was so creative and so cool that his parents were like, okay, you do this. And the teachers allowed it.
Yeah. And he just did Wicked, if you saw it.
Well, he did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's the guy who did John Chu. He's the one who did Wicked. So,
oh my goodness, how amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, my younger son, who's a singer and was writing music from the time he was 13, wrote 300 songs before he graduated from high school. I mean, that was his thing. And he has a band, Magic Giant. Anyhow, he would ask his teachers, I'm going to read a book. Can I write a song about it instead of a paper? And
really?
Some of them said yes.
That is so, I mean, and that I think is also something, it's not just for parents, also for teachers to kind of nurture that, because I think oftentimes teachers can get mired in these are the rules. Also, this is what you have to do. But really what you taught me in this book is that allowing them to sort of explore that side of who they are helps them to become that person when they grow up. And you have no idea. And the hard part is you have no idea what they're going to become. I will tell a story that I think I've told on the podcast before. I had my girls one day, they were like, please make us cookies. Please make us cookies. Please, please, please. And I had to go someplace. So I made them cookies. Then they were staying. I can't remember if they were home with dad or if they had a babysitter or someone was there with them. And I left and I came back and the cookies were all gone. And I'm like, you ate all of those cookies? And my daughter, who was at the time probably like 7, and she's like, no, we sold them. I was so mad, but I'm like, oh, I don't know whether to be mad or be like, congratulations, you know? So they started their own business. They just needed some.
That's so fun.
I was the labor. Unknowingly.
I love that. That's great. I just think it's really important for parents to realize that the path that worked for all of us when we were growing up isn't necessarily a path their child has to follow today. And you may have a child, they just love to study and their teachers love them because they get good grades in all their tests. And they just love all their science classes and they want to be a doctor. And that's great. But you may have a really different kind of kid who none of those things, excites them. And you have to figure that out and you have to support that child also. And I think there's so many more options for kids today that didn't exist when we were growing up. I was giving a talk once at a summit event and there were 150 entrepreneurs in the room. And a dad came up to me afterwards and he said, can I ask you a question? He said, I'm so upset. He said, my son started a little company in his dorm room and I think it's really stupid. And he just announced he's dropping out of college and he's moving home to work on this company. And I'm so upset I haven't talked to him for 3 weeks. So I called over this guy that I knew has made $1 gazillion in his business. And I said, Craig, you have a choice of hiring 2 different students. One of them stayed in college, graduated, wasn't inspired by anything, didn't have good grades, but somehow graduated. The other one dropped out of college, moved home, worked on his company for a couple years, ultimately decided this company wasn't going to go anywhere and he needed to get more experience. Which one do you want? And he said, without blinking an eye, I want that second kid. And so does every other entrepreneur in this room. And the dad was just like, whoa, thank you. Like it just hadn't occurred to him that his child could be successful if he didn't have a college degree.
That's fascinating. You're right, because we have a defined idea of what success looks like. And we feel like that path has to always be followed. But you're right. My dad used to always say, it's better to have a workhorse than a show horse, because you're never going to be able to get that person whether they may have all the degrees, they may have all the grades, But if they aren't the person who's the self-starter, the person who's the go-getter, and you can't necessarily see that in a degree, but you see that in the person's actions. So that's fascinating. And I kind of wonder now, in this world where, like I said, that's the expectation, everybody goes and gets a degree, are employers now looking for that person who is a little bit different from the status quo and is out there achieving on their own?
I mean, I think it depends on the company. You know, if you want to go to Wall Street, you want to go into investment banking, you have to go to a good college and you have to get an MBA from a good school. Period. That's, you know, they don't want kids who drop out. If you want to go to a startup and you think you have something to offer, yeah, they're happy if you. They don't care if you have a degree. They just want someone who. Look at Peter Thiel. He paid people to drop out of college and pursue their dreams. You know, I mean, you don't. There are things you need a degree for, and there are things you don't need a degree for, and parents just have to kind of come to terms with that.
So you've interviewed so many founders of companies that are big companies. You would know, I mean, the Under Armour, Life is Good, Tom's Shoe Company, all of these different companies. What was it like to sit down with these people? Did they seem normal? I mean, for us, I'm like, oh my goodness, how did you do this? But what were those conversations like?
So these people are all friends. I mean, they're all people I know. Some of them I just know the mom. So the Under Armour person, for example, I just knew the mom from DC. But most of all the other people, I just know them. Mm-hmm. They come to these summit events and we're friends, and they're wonderful people, and they're very low key, and they're just normal people.
What was your biggest takeaway from talking to moms?
My biggest takeaway from this whole process was that when I first heard about this, and the kid said, you have to write a book. And I'm like, I'm not going to write. I can't write a book. And they're like, you have to write a book. And I can't write a book. They're like, you have to write a book. And I said, okay, I'll write a book. And they wrote the foreword. They said, everyone needs someone to believe in them. And sometimes that's even your kids. But I had no idea what I was going to find when I started. I was kind of ambivalent about it. I chose, as you mentioned, like this hugely diverse group, like half men, half women, like every race and religion and socioeconomic background, and big families and small families, and, you know, big cities and small towns, like just everything I could think of that made people different. And they were basically all raised the same. And in every case, they had someone, usually their mom, who said, I love that you're so excited about what you're doing. I love that you're working so hard to achieve your dreams. I love that you are just so committed at this thing you love. Every one of these entrepreneurs had a passion outside of school. And in every case, the parents said, sometimes it was a big gulp, but in every case, the parents said, if this is what you love, we're really proud of you. And because the kids loved it, and because they'd chosen it, they worked really hard at it. And they developed grit and determination and focus and resilience and all the traits that you need to succeed in life. Most of them were not selling things. A lot of them, it was sports, you know, but the parents, the moms and all the parents, they supported their child in these endeavors. And they said, we're so proud of you for working so hard at something you're so enthusiastic about.
Do you think that when you heard about this, when you were talking to these parents, do you think that had these children not been given this kind of free reign, this freedom to do this, that they would have been stifled, that a lot of this would have stopped? Or did you ever run into anybody who felt like, oh, I had a lot of constraints on me, but I broke free from that?
So these were not raised by parents who said you can do what you want. These kids were raised in homes that had definite rules. I mean, and these kids were raised, you know, it's like, you have to keep your room clean. You have to save 10% of your savings and give it to charities. You have to put 10% of your money away. You know, you have to learn fiscal discipline. You have to no television during the week. I mean, just all sorts. They had rules. You come for family dinner every night. I mean, they had rules, but they also gave their kids complete freedom to make big decisions. And I've subsequently, after the first edition of the book came out, there was another book about grit. And it said like, that's actually the best way to raise kids with grit, is not super, you can do anything you want, like liberal, and not super autocratic. You have to be a doctor, but having rules and expectations, but also giving freedom to make big decisions.
And do you think that that's more of an American spirit than any place else? I mean, you'd spoken to some people whose parents had grown up in other countries. Did they feel like because they came to this country and they saw that? I asked that because there was this interesting thread on X the other day where someone was like, this is the difference between the American mindset and the British mindset. And it was a lot of, the freedom, like if I have an idea, I'm just going to go do it. And, in the UK, if you have an idea, it's like, oh, do I really want to go through all of that? What are the chances? Could I get there? Like this entrepreneurial spirit that exists in the United States, does it seem like that's kind of unique to the United States?
Yeah, that's why we have more new companies than any other country in the world. It's what makes our country great, right?
Right.
But also, I would say that, I mean, it's very interesting you asked that. The immigrant parents, it was harder for them to accept.
Really?
This new path. It was, John Chu's mom was like, at first she was horrified that all he wanted to do was make movies, Anju Moon's parents were upset that, when she wanted to leave law and go into filmmaking. And she ended up, becoming a film producer. Thomas View's parents were upset that he wanted to drop out of college, and he, with one semester to go, and he joined the first intern class at Electronic Arts and became the lead producer of League of Legends. So, sometimes it was like it was a bigger gulp, I think, for foreign parents, maybe especially the Asian parents, that they had wanted their kid to follow a more predictable path. But these were all parents who loved their kids so much, and they saw the spark of joy. And they said, okay, if eventually they said, maybe not the first day, but eventually they said, yes, if you love this, yes, go for it. We love you. We're here for you. We know there will be setbacks. Don't worry about it. You can always come home. I mean, John Chu said to me, my parents always told me I could come home if I failed, and that gave me the courage to take risks. He said,
and that was one of the things that I thought was interesting to me, because I heard a lot of people when I was graduating whose parents were like, you're not welcome back. Like, this is it. You're done. We're not coming back to our house. And that struck me because I had remembered that when I left college, that I had so many friends whose parents were like, see ya, don't ever return. And they didn't say it as a mean thing. They said it because they thought that was kind of like pushing the baby out of the nest and now you have to fly on your own. But that fascinated me, that the most successful people felt like, if I don't make it, I have a place to go. Also, one of the things that you have in your book is that they consistently said, my parents or someone who loved me always showed up. They showed up at my events. They showed up at my sports. They were always there, and they made us feel like we were really good at it. And even though now I look back and I go, oh, I wasn't really that good at that particular sport, but they were always there cheering me on. Do you think that idea of this support system that, I mean, I guess it's kind of an unconditional love, that feeling of unconditional love is what propels people to take those risks?
Right. And these were not just all moms who weren't working. A lot of them had moms who worked around the clock, and the moms weren't there for every single thing, but the moms were there whenever it was important. And they always knew their parents were there when it counted, not that they were there every second of the day. So yeah, I think that unconditional love and support and several people in the book, when they had issues, that either because they dropped out of college or because their company was failing or something, ended up moving home for a year or two. I mean, look at Paige Mykowski from Aviator Nation. I mean, she had a normal path. She moved, I think, to San Francisco, took a normal job. And both her grandparents gave her $100 for her, like her 23rd birthday or something. She said, I'm going to buy a sewing machine. She called her mom. She said, I'm quitting my job. I'm moving home. I'm going to sew. And her mom said, great. We love you. Welcome. And, Aviator Nation has like what now, 30 stores or something. So,
right.
But she moved home, and she knew she could move home. And probably if she, had to keep a job to keep paying for her apartment, she never would have done that.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that was really very fascinating to me because, I have 4 kids and I see them at this point, my oldest is in high school. So I have one high school, 3 middle school, and I watch kind of their interests. And I think that this is an age where you're really starting to see the things that they take their personal time and they invest their personal time into different ideas. And so I do have one that has always talked about becoming a seamstress and being able to create her own clothes. She wants to be a fashion designer. And so she will draw out little sketches of what she thinks that would be cool outfits. And it's not something that to me is the fascinating part. It's not something I've ever done. And I think that was kind of a theme that I saw throughout your book too. It wasn't like they had seen their parents doing this work. These were totally new ideas they had created all on their own.
Right. And so for me, both our kids had passions from the time they were about 13. My younger son, Austin, as I was saying, was writing music. And our older son, Elliot, was playing tennis, like 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we don't play tennis and we don't know anything about music. And I'd go to these tournaments of the top 100 kids in the country, and I was literally like the only person who didn't know the rules.
Yes.
And it wasn't until after I wrote the book and I started thinking about it, I realized like it was really good that they had found these things they loved that we knew nothing about, because we're really helpful people. And if it had been anything that we knew something about, we'd have been all over them with suggestions. Why don't you try it this way?
Right.
Let me introduce you to this person. I can help you get this. I can do this for you. And we were just like, no idea. You want to, you have to figure out who to train with, what rackets to get, what tournaments to enter, for our older son. You have to figure out what hardware to get and what software to get and who should produce your CD and who should give you piano lessons and guitar lessons and drum like we don't know any of these things. Like we paid for stuff, but we couldn't give them any. And that was really good that they had to figure it out. I just didn't know it at the time.
So what would you say are the top 3 suggestions to parents who see these traits in their kids or even don't, just as a parent? But I think that if you're out there and you're listening, I would agree with you that it's around I would say 11 to 13 that you start to really see what they're focused on, what they want to pour their lives into. And not to say that you know what your kid is going to do, but you start to see what their personality lends them to. And so as someone who's gone through this and interviewed all these people, what is your advice to parents out there that are right now going, oh my gosh, we're in this digital world where kids are constantly on their phones and we get so much advice from TV and it's not so much advice, I would say criticism. It feels like as a parent today that you are suffering from constant criticism. Don't let your kids have a phone at the table. Don't let your kids take, the car out here. Don't let your kids stay out late. Don't let your kids have a phone at this age. And it's just, but these are all things that are out there. I think it's also challenging because when we were young, you could just call up a friend on the phone. And now they don't have a phone. There's no house phones. You can't call your friend's house and talk to them. So there are a lot of pressures as parents that we're like, how do we handle this? So what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give parents today?
Yeah, I mean, those are all big issues. And, I'm not the person to answer those, although I would say no phones at the table.
Right.
But I would tell parents first, and you're right, don't worry if there's no passion, before they're 12 or 13 or whatever. That was the age that both of my kids found it. And a lot of kids their passion may change over time. I mean, my older son does nothing professionally with tennis today, So I would tell parents, first of all, see what gives your kids joy. Parents who tell me, parents of high school seniors say, well, I don't know what my kids' passions or interests are. I'm like, you just haven't paid attention. You've been forcing them to spend so much time doing things you think are useful that you've never let them explore. You've never let them try different things and see what makes them happy. So see what gives them joy and then encourage them to spend time in that. The second thing I think is really important is let your child compete in something, whether it's submitting fashion designs for a jury, whether it's a sport, whether it's running for class office, whether it's whatever. Let them compete in something and let them learn how to compete. Let them learn to pivot when it's not working well. Let them learn that failure is how they learn and grow. Let them learn that setbacks are okay. And let them become resilient and learn how to deal with setbacks and failure. And don't criticize them for failing. If they fail at something, ask them, what would you do differently next time? What did you learn about this? What do you think you could have changed? Is there something you'd do differently? Don't say, oh, it's the other guy's fault. Get them to start being curious and to thinking, and get them to be willing to take risks and to know that if they take risks and it doesn't work out, you're okay with that.
No, and that's interesting because I noticed you talked about your son playing tennis, and there was another person in there that said, I was a really hardcore soccer player. Don't use soccer today at all. But it seems like that time of being a part of a team was really important to a lot of these kids that ended up becoming entrepreneurs as well. So you also talk about regrets that parents have. And I think that some of those you probably just covered in the suggestions of, not going after a kid for a failure. But I do think I think my generation really struggles with the idea of, well, when our kids fail, what do we do? How can we save them? There is this, yes. We are the generation that was always praised. So how do we, if you don't fail, you don't learn. And that's what I've obviously learned in my business life and everything else is the best information you get out of life is through failure. So how do you convince parents today to not freak out when there is failure? But what are also the top regrets of parents of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's just, back on the failure thing, I just want to reiterate how important it is and follow up to what you said, Tudor, because it's so, we want to protect our children. And if something bad happens and they fail or it doesn't work or they don't get the part or they don't make the field goal or they don't make the team or the team doesn't win or whatever, they don't win the office, whatever, we're like, oh, we want to protect them. We want to make them feel better. It's okay. It wasn't your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And, no, it's the worst possible thing we can do as parents. And all of us did it. I did it. We all did it. And we all feel really bad about the times we did it. We all wish we hadn't done it when we did it, but we all hope that we didn't do it more than we did do it, and we all hope that we let them fail. And we know that that's okay, because you're never going to be an entrepreneur or even entrepreneurial. You're never going to be creative if you're afraid to take risks. And you're never going to take risks if you're afraid to fail. And so,
that goes right back to kids feeling like they're welcome back at the house. That really stuck with me, I have to say, because like I said, when I graduated from college, so many of my friends said, well, I was told not to come home. And I remember thinking, what a scary, and I don't think I ever felt that way. And I actually never did go back to my parents' house after college, but I never felt like I couldn't. And so I do think that helps you to feel like, okay, I got this. I'm because if I don't, I'm okay.
Right, exactly. No, so obviously you have great parents because you didn't go home, but you knew you could. And that's the only important thing, to have that confidence that it's there for you.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, reading the book it goes very fast. I love the way you set it up so that you hear these people's stories, but it's quick and it was very emotional for me. As I was reading through it, I was really touched by so many of these stories, because I think not only, especially having kids and I'm sure having kids of any age, the book is great. Having my kids right and then smack dab in high school and middle school, and having just lost my own dad a couple years ago, reading through it was such an emotional journey for me because I'm like, wow, it gave me such good advice and and kind of affirmed things that I am doing. And then, okay, maybe I need to change that a little bit. But it was also just like looking back at my own parents and seeing my own upbringing and just brought up a lot of emotion, but you could tell the love. I think that was the most striking part about the book was just so much love.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really like this second edition so much more than the first edition because it's 99 stories and each one is 2 to 4 pages. And each story starts with a picture of them when they were young and a picture of them today. And so you're like, oh, those people, they were just like me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like,
yes. That's exactly right. Yes. That's what I thought. I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like my childhood.
Like here's an example, like Eric Ryan, who started $3 billion companies, including Method Products, which you use to clean your house. His passion growing up was sailing. That's all he cared about was sailing. And, it's just cool. Every single story in there, you just see a picture of them when they're like a dorky high school kid or something.
But it makes it such a quick, it's a quick read because of that. You can go through but it's also fascinating because these are, like you said, Method products. They're all products that everything that is in there when you read about it, you're like, oh my goodness, the story behind this is fascinating. So it's not like you're picking something up and you're hearing about people out of nowhere. Like Aviator Nation, I had just gone through one of their stores about 6 months ago in California. I'm like, whoa, we don't have a lot of that over here on the west side of Michigan. But then suddenly I started seeing it and I was like, then I see it in your book. I'm like, oh, I can connect all these brands to a story that is not unlike mine and not unlike my kids. And so that's why I think it's so fascinating. If you have, like I said, kids of any age, this is a book that is going to help you be a better parent or affirm what you're already doing and just make you feel like, wow, America is a great country. So tell us again the name of the book, where everybody can find it, how they can get it. Amazon,
Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams. 99 Stories from Families Who Did.
Really, thank you for writing it because the intro where your sons tell you got to write the book and they say sometimes you have to, it's like parenting up, right? Hey, we've got you, mom, do this. We think we believe in you. They could only have been that way if you had been an amazing mom. So I know you were, and I know you are, and I appreciate that you have encouraged all of us.
That's so sweet. I just want to say, not everyone in the book has a $1 billion company.
Right.
And my son actually said to me, Mom, don't just do the people with the $1 billion companies, because that's not what most people are going to be. Most people just want to know, hey, entrepreneurship is a path. And maybe it'll just be me, and maybe it'll be me and 4 employees, but it's a path and it's something parents should be open to.
And it is definitely a strong path in this country. That's why I think it's not just that it is a book about love. It is a book about what is possible here. And in this moment, I think that especially at this time right now, so many people are clawing back at what America really is and saying, I just want to hear about it. And if you really want to hear what your country is and how amazing your country is, read about the people who build the companies every single day. And like you said, it's even the restaurant down the street from you. It's the big company that makes the clothing that you wear. All of these people have been able to take this path because of not only how they were raised, but the country they live in. And I appreciate the fact that you were able to highlight that in such a beautiful way.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Absolutely. And thank you for coming on to talk to us. And for everybody listening, make sure you check out the book and check out the author. Her name is Margot Machol Bisnow. Yeah. And this is the book. See, Raising an Entrepreneur. Margot is amazing. Thank you so much.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much, Tudor.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. You can go to TudorDixonPodcast.com and subscribe there, or the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts to join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.